Can you hear me online? Okay, so good morning, everyone. It's the last day of our Rohatsu session. This has been seems to me this has been a very strong retreat. Had wonderful Dharma talks by Sensei Myogetsu. And here we are, last day of the retreat. Not so long ago, it was Monday morning, and you were thinking, man, I got 5 days to go. Now look where we are. So, Dongshan's No Grass, case 89 from the Shoyoroku in the introduction. Move and you bury your body 10,000 feet deep. Don't move and sprouts grow right where you are. Kind of like those weeds that Myogetsu was talking about yesterday. You must cast off both sides and let the middle grow. Then you must buy some sandals and travel some more before you'll really attain realization. Attention. Dongshan said to the assembly, it's the beginning of autumn, the end of summer, and you brethren will go, some to the east, some to the west. You must go where there is not an inch of grass for 10,000 miles. He also said, but where there is not an inch of grass for 10,000 miles, how can you go? Shishuang said, going out the gate, immediately there is grass. Dayang said, I'd say even not going out the gate, still the grass is boundless. Wangji's verse, grass boundless, inside the gate, outside the gate, You see by yourself, to set foot in the forest of thorns is easy. To turn the body outside the luminous screen is hard. Look, look, how many kinds. For the while going along with the old tree, with the same emaciation in the cold, about to follow the spring wind into the scars of the burning. So, Tungshang Liangche, Tozan Ryokai, grew up in eastern China. He's one of the great Zen teachers in our lineage, one of the founders of the Soto school, Dongshang. And you know, the situation here is they're finishing up an Ango just like we are. They'd done a 3-month Ango training. This is back in 800s, mid-800s. How long ago was that? 1,000 years? More than. So they were doing exactly what we're doing here in China over 1,000 years ago. And they'd all finished the Ango. They were tired of Ango, ready to go out and be in samsara again, probably. Missing samsara, maybe. Who knows? And they're all getting ready to go home to their respective abodes. They've been practicing hard like we have. And Dongshang says to the assembly, it's the beginning of autumn, it's the beginning of winter, the end of fall. Now you must go home, some east, some west, some north, some south. And you must go where there's not an inch of grass for 10,000 miles. Where's that place? You know, Myogetsu was talking about weeds yesterday, how they grow. I spent 3 years when we were in Hawaii farming a community garden almost every day. And I've done a lot of gardening most of my life, and I'm very familiar with weeds. You know, the healthier the soil, the healthier the weeds. You make really good soil, the weeds are sure to come. So what's this place? There's not an inch of grass for 10,000 miles. So grass is a metaphor in Buddhism for delusion. So you must go to this place where there's no delusion for 10,000 miles. Where is that place? How do you get there? Someplace you can go? Is it a monastery? Is it the country? Is it back to nature? Where is it? Is a garden free of weeds? So obviously this is not a place we can go as such, is it? You know, Diamond Sutra says, dwell nowhere and bring forth that mind. What kind of mind is this? So Dongshang is saying, go to that place where there's no conflict, no entanglement in things for 10,000 miles. A place where there's no problems, no conflict. Where is such a place? It's the home of all Buddhas. But we can't attain it, and we can't lose it. It's a place we all want to be. I long to be here, to be free of suffering, be truly free. There are many koans about this. It's Tozan's no cold or heat. In the Hekigan Roku, a monk said to Tozan, "Cold and heat descend upon us. How can we avoid them?" And Tozan said, "Why don't you go where there is no cold or heat?" And the monk says, "Where is that place?" Where is the place where there's no cold or heat? Tozan says, when it's cold, let it be so cold that it kills you. Kill yourself with the cold. When it's hot, kill yourself with the heat. I don't think the monk was satisfied with that answer. What do you think? Nah, still cold. Well, this is a dilemma, isn't it? Some place that we want to go, because we think there's some place for us to find. We naturally do. We secretly think there is some place, secretly, where we could escape from suffering, where we could be free from all the hassles of life. What would happen if you found such a place? If you found such a place, then you wouldn't be able to leave from that place, and then you'd be in prison there. And no longer be that place, would it? It'd be a prison that you made. We all have some expectation about something that's going to come out of this practice. After all, we just broke our legs for 7 days sitting and expect some kind of reward, right? Well, you got his sore legs. Yeah, some. The sitting is its own reward, isn't it? Still, we kind of hope there's some place we're going to get to. So you hear about Zen, you hear about enlightenment, you can't help in your imagination paint some kind of picture, some kind of image of what that looks like. And the minute you do that, right there, you're stuck. That's how our minds are. They're sticky. We stick. So we have to really, really practice to get unstuck. We're all sticky minds. Like a wad of, our brain is like a wad of bubble gum. It gets stuck in there. So Tongshang is saying, go to the place where there is no thought or expectation at all for 10,000 miles. A place of great peace, home of the Buddhas. Place where mind and body drop away, completely dropped off, body and mind. Forget the self. Forget that sticky mind. And then Dongshang asks a further question. He says, but when there is not an inch of grass for 10,000 miles, how can you go there? Because it's not a place. So where do you find it? Where do you find the home of the Buddha? And then Shishuang says, going out the gate, immediately there's grass. As soon as you step out the gate, there's grass. The weeds are right there. The gates in Buddhism are another metaphor for our senses, our 5 senses. And then the 6th would be our mind. So the gates are the way we experience the world, right? We have a body, and we see, we hear, we taste. And then we get attached to what we see, hear, taste, touch. Get attached to our minds, our thoughts, expectations. soon as we think there's something, there's a separation. As soon as we think we want to know, we want to understand these teachings, and somehow they defy that kind of understanding. Wanting to be in that place is wanting to understand emptiness, shunyata, prajna. We chant it every morning in the Heart Sutra, prajna, shunyata. So when we sit, every gate is wide open. You sit Shikantaza, everything sits. The problem isn't that something's going through the gate. The problem is that we're trying to shut the gate, and stop things from going through. We think the meditation is about some kind of escape. We're going to escape from suffering. We're going to escape from samsara. We're going to escape from all our troubles and our entanglements and our difficulties. So Dayang says, I'd say even not going out the gate, still the grass is boundless. It's not a matter of outside or inside. We tend to think there's an external world of complications out there, and then there's the internal world I'm cultivating of peaceful mind. We make that distinction. It's all that riffraff out there. Here we are, peaceful Buddhas in the Zendo. We make these kind of distinctions. So we speak of the gateless gate. What's that? Where is that? So once we see the grass is everywhere, we can begin to appreciate the wisdom of no escape. That's truly the road. That's the way we find freedom. Really surrender to life, to the grass. It's everywhere. Trying to escape is just a way to be imprisoned. So in the poem, Huangji says, when the grass is boundless, both inside and outside the gate, then the gate becomes meaningless. There's no boundary separating one place from another. It's interesting, the end of that poem talks about the withered tree. The tree is there in the place where no grass is growing. Another koan speaks of a dragon singing in a withered tree. So there might be wisdom, but it's dried up, no heart. Wisdom without heart is not much use. So wisdom of no escape is to, our hearts are broken. It's not possible to not have your heart broken. If you love somebody, you're going to have your heart broken. Sensei talking about her family in Hawaii. What was that like for those Japanese Americans? Proud to be Americans, losing everything and being put in prison. So we have these teachings about wisdom, prajna. We hear about it a lot. We don't have too many koans about prajna. We have one. And as I always like to say, to just kind of bring this down to earth so that we can get it experientially. I think the way we get it at prajna and this teaching of emptiness is you start by paying attention. You start where you are, paying attention to your experience, and then you hear teachings about how to meditate, you learn ways to meditate, and you pay attention and you do it. And at some point, you experience some kind of warmth taking place. You don't know where it comes from, where it begins or where it ends. And and it feels good. It's how we relate to each other. It's through warmth and empathy and compassion in our hearts, right? That warmth is an important part of our humanity. But we don't know where it comes from. And as soon as you try to manipulate it in any way or control it or own it or possess it, it's like trying to possess a place where there's no grass. It goes away, right? Then you dry up. And I think we learn through trial and error. We all do this. We all are learning this, that you can't own this teaching, the Dharma, in this way. You have to let go. And when you really let go and get out of the way, or when you truly love the Dharma, then the warmth is here. But it's empty. It's not something, you don't possess it. It has nothing to do with you. And when you see that and you feel inspired by that, then you get something that we call prajna, which is a non-referential intelligence, an intelligence you discover that's actually here. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing, doesn't care about you. The Dharma doesn't give a shit about your agenda. Doesn't care about your projects, your hopes, your dreams. Doesn't care. And there's this intelligence you discover, the wisdom. It's non-referential. You understand what I'm saying? You discover that experientially, you get it, and then you hear teachings about prajna, and you get, this is something I can actually rely on. This is some kind of sanity. And you begin to trust that prajna. And it's tough because prajna cuts. It will cut you. It will cut your delusion, your smugness, your conceit, your hypocrisy. When you try to cut corners, it's a no bullshit meter. I mean, if you trust and rely on prajna, it's gonna hold your feet to the fire every time. And you know when you're doing something fishy. Because this intelligence the meter will light up, it'll go red into the red zone. So, well, maybe I should take another look at what I'm saying or what I'm doing. And you learn that honesty, that truth meter of prajna is so precious. Not always convenient, but brings us back to some sanity where we can be open-hearted again and be connected. And prajna always shows up with emptiness. You can't have one without the other. In the Heart Sutra, it's all about prajna and emptiness. Prajna is the tool, the sword that we sharpen. And if you sharpen that sword and you rely on it, then you begin to appreciate there is nothing here that's self-existing. Not me, not you. There's no objective world out there that is apart from me. And as Trungpa said, this may be the most profound teaching that was ever discovered in human history, the teaching of emptiness. It's not a belief, not a point of view. So I'll tell you a little story about Prajna. We have there's one koan, well, there's several, but there's one koan in the Blue Cliff record, case 35, about Manjusri's 3x3. And the koan takes place in the middle of the story, which I'll tell you. But this 3x3, in most of the koans, we have some record of the koan somewhere. There's some understanding of what the koan is about in the tradition. And this is the one koan where we have no clue about what was meant by 3x3. So it could mean anything you want it to mean. But I asked Aiken Roshi about it once. I said, what's that 3x3? He says, oh, I don't know. Maybe it's about the Sangha. We seem to do things in threes. Maybe. Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe that's what it is. So this is a story about Mount Wutai. And this is in the koan, but I'm going to tell you it as a story rather than as a koan. And this is a mountain, Manjusri Mountain in China. It was a very sacred mountain. And in the old days, it was common for monastics to make pilgrimages to Manjusri Mountain. But you weren't supposed to do this. You weren't supposed to go to the mountain. It was against the rules, but they did it anyway. And there was this, because you weren't supposed to do this because there was this distrust of the mythological in China. Chinese are very practical, down-to-earth folks. But in spite of this distrust, still the monks would go there. They would go and hang out on this wild mountain long enough, hoping that they might encounter Manjusri, that they would entice Manjusri to show up, and they would build hermit huts and monasteries and things. Now, the first thing you got to really appreciate about this is that they weren't supposed to do this, right? But there are huts all over the place on the mountain. This is so Zen, you see, because if they had said, yeah, you can do it, then there would have been, it would develop into some orthodoxy, and there would be a way that you build the monastery or the hut. They'd have dimensions, exact dimensions about how it was to be done, but there was no rules, so everyone just did it. It was wild place. And the koans are kind of like that. They're supposed to help us retrieve our wildness. So these monks, so it's ubiquitous. I mean, the monks they'd all break the rules and go there. And so everybody did it. So the pilgrimages weren't, they didn't get solidified into some trip, how to do it, all the techniques for going to Manjusri Mountain, but they're all going hoping to meet Manjusri. That was the belief, that if you hung out there on this wild mountain, you could entice Manjusri Bodhisattva to show up. But Zen sort of defies turning anything into a scheme or a method. We'll use any tool, anything, but if it's not working anymore, we'll also just throw it away. Now, the heart of this story is about this particular fellow named Wuzhou, and his name means no attachment. And he was one of the monks who snuck away in the dark of the night to climb up onto Mount Wutai. And he was young when he made this pilgrimage, and he was a Chan monk, and he wanted to meet Manjusri. Actually, he had met Manjusri many years before in the marketplace, but he didn't know it. He didn't recognize the beggar that appeared in the marketplace as Manjusri. So he went looking somewhere else. to find the place where there's no grass for 10,000 miles. They climbed up onto this wild place, dangerous place on the mountain. And Manjusri imagined a temple into existence to take Wuzhou in for the night. And then Manjusri showed up as the headmaster of the temple and welcomed Wuzhou and asked him, "Where are you from?" And Wuzhou replied, "I am from the south." And Manjusri asked him, "How is Buddhism being maintained in the south?" And Wuzhou replied, "In this corrupt age of the Dharma, monks are honoring the precepts a little." And Manjusri asked him, "How many are there?" And Wuzhou replied, "I don't know, 300 here, 500 there." Still, he doesn't recognize Manjusri, right? And then Wuzhou, kind of curious, asked Manjusri, "And how is Buddhism being maintained here?" And Manju replies, "Ordinary people and saints live together. Dragons and snakes mixed." Wuzhou says, "Well, how many are there?" And Manjusri says, "In front, 3 by 3. In back, 3 by 3. Well, Manjusri takes out some tea. They're drinking tea, and Manjusri holds up this perfect crystal bowl, and he asks Wuzhou, "Do you have this in the south?" And Wuzhou replies, "No, I don't think so." And Manjusri said, then how do you drink tea?" "Well, you might be drinking that out of a styrofoam cup." So Wuzhou was kind of puzzled by this, felt a little disheartened, actually. He'd come all this way looking for Manjusri, and this guy holding up this fancy tea bowl, asking him strange questions. So a little discouraged, decides to leave. So the young attendant accompanies him to outside the gate. And as he's leaving, Wuzhou asks him, "What temple is this anyway?" And the boy points to the mountain behind Wuzhou. And as Wuzhou turned around to look, all he saw was this beautiful mountain in this deep indigo color. And when he looked around, the boy was gone, the temple was gone. So Wuzhou decided to stay on that mountain. First he stayed by himself, and he ended up eventually in another monastery as a cook. He was a Tenzo, and he would be cooking in the kitchen, and Manjusri would appear over the rice pot trying to snatch some food, and Wuzhou would hit him with a spoon. "Get away." So Zen is full of stories of failure, and kind of interesting. You read these koans and people always failing. And the most epic story we have of the most really just epic failure is Seppo, the story of Seppo. Gongfeng Yi Tsung. He became a great Zen teacher, but his story is epic for how long it took him to clarify. And this is just remarkable because all the reports of him that we have of him are of his dismal failures in the spiritual journey. And we have actually recorded 9 disappointing visits with Tongshan and other visits with Tao Tzu, Ta Tong, Tosu Daido, who called him a black lacquer bucket, which means a dimwit. Still, he persisted. And so what stands out about Seppo is his just epic struggle and determination to keep going. Just kept going no matter what. Just amazing. He was a slow bloomer. And yet he became one of the great Zen teachers in China. Well, you're likely to enter Zen thinking you're going to become a perfect Zen student. And then it's really disappointing after a while, and especially if you take up koan study, it will really just do a number on you. I never felt more stupid than when I was doing koan study. So all our ideas of Zen have to fall away. All our expectations, our fantasies, failure is part of the path. But eventually, this Seppo, they had a saying in China, Joshu in the north, Seppo in the south. That's how big he was. He was born in 822 in Fujian province in southeastern China. And from a very early age, he was drawn to Buddhism. At the age of 12, his father took him to a Vinaya master, and he stayed in that monastery until he was 17. But he didn't receive ordination until he was 28. That's pretty late in China. So as I said, he was a late bloomer. And after his ordination, he set out on the pilgrimage to various masters, as was often the practice. And in the Blue Cliff Record, we learned that each monastery he visited, he would set up his bucket, take out his wooden spoon, and serve the rice as a cook. So he was an earnest young man. He was serious about his spiritual practice. He visited many teachers, and he revisited them many times again because he always got turned away. He visited Tosu Daido 3 times, and each time he was sent packing down the mountain path, only to return again. 4 times this teacher called him a black lacquer bucket. You're dimwit. Now, one of these visits, Tosu pointed to a rock outside his hut and said, "All past, present, and future Buddhas are here." To which Seppo replied, "All but there is one who is not here," demonstrating what he thought was the insight into emptiness, but only demonstrating his duality in oneness. So the teacher shouted, "You black lacquer bucket." Seppo went to see Master Tozan 9 times, came, and 9 times he left, unable to answer the master's questions. But Seppo persisted, working hard in the kitchen, always punctual, still unable to answer his teacher's question. One time he carried in some firewood, threw it on the ground. Dongzhang saw an opening and asked him, "How heavy is the firewood?" And Seppo replied, "There is nobody in the world who could lift it," implying that because it is empty, Dongzhang said, "Then how did it get here?" Finally, Dongzhang told Seppo to go study with Tokusan. And we have this famous story of Seppo and Ganto. Now, Seppo and Ganto were Dharma brothers, and Seppo was actually older. He was 6 years older than Ganto, but Ganto was a fast learner. He learned and Seppo was slow. So even though Seppo was older, he bloomed a lot later than Ganto. And they were in the monastery with Tokusan. And Tokusan, one day, Seppo sees Tokusan. We have a koan about this. And Tokusan's going down the hall with his oryoki bowls for the meal. And Seppo sees him and says, "Where are you going, old man? The bell for the meal hasn't sounded yet." Tokusan just turns around and goes back to his quarters. And Seppo goes and tells this to Ganto. He said, "Hey, I just got one over on the old man. He was there. He's going senile. He was going down the hall. They hadn't even rung the bell yet for the meal, and he's already going to the cafeteria." And Ganto says to Seppo, "Yeah, you really got one over on him, didn't you? The old man hasn't seen the last word of Zen yet." So Ganto's kind of egging Seppo on, right? And the koan goes on. And but then there's many stories about Ganto and Seppo, and Ganto was always trying to help Seppo clarify. And it was difficult for Seppo. So finally, one day he came to Dokusan with Tokusan and asked him, in what must have been a plaintive voice, "Can I also attain what the ancestors attained? Why can't I attain it?" That's sweet. Yeah, I mean, just being honest. Tokusan hit him with a stick. He cried out, "What are you talking about?" Later, Seppo said that when this happened, it was like the bottom falling out of a bucket. Something had opened up for Seppo. Yet he didn't really fully realize it. So he left and he came back the next day with the question, "Can I also attain it?" He's sincere. Not being clever, being heartfelt. And this time Tokusan was a little kinder, spoke to Seppo. Zen has no words, neither does it have anything to give. And something began to shift in Seppo. He didn't quite get it, and yet he recounted this to Ganto. Ganto said, "Deshan has an iron backbone, but he spoils Zen with his soft words." Yeah. So it goes on. Years go on. Seppo is still practicing. Deshan passes away in 865. And though Seppo was considered his Dharma heir, he still hadn't really clarified things till years later. And he had his opening with Ganto. They were on pilgrimage, and they became snowbound in an inn on Tortoise Mountain in Lee Province. And Ganto spent the whole day sleeping while Seppo was earnestly meditating day and night. And after a couple of days, the Seppo became irritated with Ganto, and he shook him and said, get up, don't be so lazy. We're on pilgrimage. You have a grave responsibility. Great wisdom is our companion, but all you do is sleep all day." And Ganto, not appreciating having been woken up, yelled back, "Stop carrying on, just eat and sleep, just live your life. Sitting meditation all day is like being a statue in the village hut. If you go on like this, you'll just confuse people." And Seppo responded, "I have a heaviness in my chest. I can't stop meditating all the time." And Ganto tried to reassure him. He said, "You'll be a great teacher someday. Don't go on like this." "I'm really anxious," Seppo says. And sensing something was could open, Ganto said, "Look, tell me your understanding and I'll help you correct it." So it goes on, and eventually Seppo clarifies with Ganto. And so you can meditate till the cows come home. It may or may not be helpful. There's no method. Meditation is an upaya, just like nonviolent communication or counsel process or the grace process. We have many upayas, but the clarification is about who we are right here, right now. And this clarification is about this teaching that form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And you don't get it with your conceptual mind. You get it when you surrender. Really, truly surrender. And then it's right here. It's always been here. It's not a place where you're going to go. There's not a method. So we are about ready to finish this Ango. I think we're tired a little bit. The legs might hurt. But so grateful for your practice, for your just the persistence that of showing up day after day after day after day, practicing together like this. Very precious, not ordinary at all. So I appreciate your faith in the Dharma, your support of the Sangha community, one of the three treasures. And we will finish this, we'll finish everything. Well, we'll finish the sesshin tonight with council process. And I hope you'll come. It's wonderful to finish the council, finish the sesshin by speaking and listening from the heart to each other. We don't do this enough. And then tomorrow, we will truly finish the Ango, and Myogetsu will finish the Ango for us. And she'll either be finished, or the Ango will be finished, or we'll all be finished together. Yeah, it's been so wonderful having Myogetsu as Shuso this Ango. She's been just, you all know, if you've had any of her teachings on Tonglen, you know how precious she is, and how lucky we are to have her here in our Sangha. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Thank you, Roshi, for the great talk. I really enjoyed it. The words that came up to me as you were talking about the 10,000 miles without grasses was Shantideva, actually one of his quotes. And Shantideva was another monk who's pretty famous, wrote a book that's actually out there called The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And he said, where can you find enough leather to cover the whole world? But if you cover your feet with leather sandals, the whole world is covered. So
Take care of it for yourself, and then you can take care of everyone else, as you are doing.
Roshi, one wonderful talk. It's just been so precious to hear so many different ways that the Dharma is expounded and that it's presented. And you've given me so much more confidence to have an epic fail tomorrow. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I related to the slow learner. I feel that way often with things. In fact, I think I said that out loud as I was trying to thread my first needle. It took me 5 tries, and I just said, like, I'm a slow learner. So I relate to that. And throughout your talk, I keep coming back to something you said in the Foundations of Mindfulness class is, there's the map, and then there's the territory. And that's what I feel about this process. There's certain things you can learn about, but you really don't know until you kind of experience it. And so that seems to be a theme that just keeps coming back to me.
Yeah, in the Buddha Dharma, there's no slow learner or fast learner. But it took Seppo a long time to figure that out. No fast talkers, no slow talkers. But yeah, just keep going. No, I failed miserably I was a terrible Zen student. Terrible. I left my Zumi Roshi to study with Trungpa Rinpoche, wandering around, grasses up to here. I came back to Zen much later. I'd done a lot of Vajrayana practice, and it got too Baroque for me. And we were in Hawaii, and I found Aiken Roshi. I was really lucky he was there. And I came back to Zen many years later. And I was really discouraged by koan study. Really, really felt stupid. And but I just kept going. Had a wife that encouraged me. I had good teachers. Maizumi Roshi was very patient with me. Yeah, so I think the thing to remember is that a lot of people have had the same kind of experience in Zen of failing. It seems necessary to fail in some way to find our heart. It's kind of how we find bodhicitta. It's by really messing up, and then we find a way forward. But it's not about being perfect. It's a very common trap in Zen. People, because we're so, much of the practice is about being precise. You got to pay attention during service, or you're going to get yelled at really quickly. If we're chanting the Heart Sutra in Japanese, you better be looking at that. If you don't know it, you better be looking at, and especially if you're the you got to be following that, paying attention, because that's the training, right? And so, and then you get the idea that Zen is about being perfect, and then that's a big trap. It just doesn't work, because no one's perfect like that. The Dharma's perfect, but we aren't. Yeah, the Dharma's never been broken, no flaw, no scratch in the Dharma. No, it's never been traumatized, never been hurt, never been betrayed, broken. It's always whole. What's whole can't be broken. Call it the diamond wisdom. That's why we rely on the Dharma, because it's saying something clear that makes sense. Sun rises, You don't get up in the morning. If you have a bad morning, you get up and say, "Oh, it's a bad sun today." No, there's a bad sun this morning. No one says that. Even if you're really depressed, you don't say, I don't like the sun this morning. You don't say that. There's some sanity in our world we can tap into. Anything else? If not, then I think we'll break for lunch and rest a little bit. Yeah. And please be mindful that you are, those of you that have been sitting regularly, you are dilated right now, which means you're really in a slightly altered state. You're wide open. You need to be mindful when you're going out, public transportation especially. If you're on a train here in Chicago, driving your car, just be mindful that you're dilated, you're opened up, and you need to make sure you take care of yourself. And then tonight at 7 we'll do council circle, and that will be the closing for this retreat. Then I hope you all join us tomorrow for the Shuso Hosen, and I hope those of you that are in Ongo, I'm going to ask you all to sign up to ask questions of the Shuso, and ask hard questions too. Give her don't let her off the hook. Yeah, she can take it. Challenge her. We're all waking up together. It's a little scary. It's a public ceremony, and it's just inspiring that we can do this together. And she'll be fine. There's no way she can fail, and there's no way she can win. So what are you worried about? But she'll worry, because everyone that's been through this knows. I've told you my story about it, haven't I? Okay. When I did this Shuso in that mountain center in '94, I was practicing with my Zumi Roshi was still alive. It was a year before he died. And then I was there with my teacher too, Nickley McMahon Roshi, and I was staying in a cabin by myself for 3 months. And the last end of the Ango was, we had a 7-day session just like this. And I'd go home every night at the end of the day, and I would take out all my sutra books and my books on Dogen, and I would write copious notes about what I was going to say and how learned I was going to sound, you know. And I got to the night before I'm to give my talk. I went home and I looked at those notes, and I guess my prajna meter kicked in. He said, "This is bullshit." As I tore them up, and I had no notes. I was really and I went down in the morning for service. We're just doing service, and I'm just depressed. I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna say. I gotta give a talk today. And we were chanting the heart sutra. I just broke out. I was weeping, and I was like crying. Go through the service, I come out, I felt pretty grounded, you know. And I went and saw Nickley, my teacher, and she said, "Oh, Joshin, just be yourself. Just trust yourself." Okay. Not very reassuring. So it all went well, but I just talked about my experience, you know. So, and I don't think anyone was terribly impressed. It was all right. We all had a good time. So everyone goes through this, and it's as she always says, Dharma is precious, right? Isn't that what you say? And this tradition is precious, and tomorrow is also precious. So what we do, the way we practice, and the way we support each other, and it's really, these rites of passage are important in the life of a community. They're important kind of milestones that mark something important. And We need to see them. We need to have ritual that gives form to things that we can't see. And so I'm just talking on and on, so I'm going to stop. I've said enough. Thank you. Prepare for lunch.
Yes, and it's not here yet, so when you shoot the Teisho and Rohan returns, should be like 10 minutes.
Okay, so we'll rest.
Yes.